My name is Claire Bennett, and for most of my life, I believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Not because I was cruel. Not because I lied. Not because I ever wanted to hurt anyone. I believed it because the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally spent 33 years convincing me that I was the problem. In our family, my younger sister Vanessa was the sunshine. She was the one everyone celebrated, defended, and proudly introduced to friends. I was simply the difficult one. It became my identity long before I understood what the word even meant. If Vanessa forgot to do her homework, my parents laughed and said she was just being creative. If I forgot mine, Dad would stare at me over the dinner table and say, "Claire, why do you always have to make everything harder than it needs to be?" If Vanessa broke an expensive vase, Mom would say, "Accidents happen." If I accidentally chipped a coffee mug, I would hear about responsibility for weeks. At first, I thought every family worked this way. Children don't know they're being treated unfairly. They simply assume they deserve whatever they're given. For years, I tried harder. Better grades. More chores. Fewer arguments. I believed that if I became perfect enough, maybe one day my parents would look at me the way they looked at Vanessa. That day never came. When I graduated at the top of my university class, my father shook my hand like I was a business associate. When Vanessa barely passed her exams, my parents threw her a celebration dinner because they were proud she didn't give up. I smiled through every family dinner. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every Mother's Day brunch where Vanessa received hugs, gifts, and endless praise while I quietly helped clear the dishes. No one noticed. Or maybe they noticed. They just didn't care. The only person who ever looked at me differently was my grandmother. Margaret Bennett had a way of seeing through people without making them uncomfortable. She noticed the little things. The extra serving I quietly put on everyone else's plate before taking the smallest one for myself. The way I apologized for things that weren't my fault. The way I stayed silent whenever Vanessa interrupted me because I already knew no one would ask me to finish my sentence. One afternoon, when I was 27, Grandma invited me over for tea. She poured 2 cups, smiled gently, and asked, "Claire, are you happy?" I remember laughing because it was such an unexpected question. "I have a good job," I answered. "That's not what I asked." I looked down at my tea. "No," I admitted quietly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've spent your entire life trying to earn love that should have been given to you freely." Those words stayed with me for years. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear them until much later. Grandma never openly criticized my parents. She didn't have to. Her silence often said more than words ever could. She simply reminded me that my worth wasn't determined by how often someone chose me. Looking back now, I think she already knew something I didn't. Maybe she saw where our family was headed. Maybe she knew that one day, everything my parents believed about fairness would collapse under its own weight. At the time, I couldn't imagine that happening. The Bennett family looked perfect from the outside. My father owned a successful construction company. My mother organized charity galas and community events. Vanessa filled her social media with luxury vacations, designer handbags, and carefully edited family photos that made us look like the happiest people in America. Thousands of strangers believed those pictures. I almost did too. But photographs never show what happens after everyone stops smiling. Before we go any further, if you enjoy slow-burn family dramas filled with karma, emotional twists, and satisfying endings, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to Quiet Karma Stories. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you original stories like this. Now, let's get back to the story. By the time I turned 33, I had stopped expecting my parents to change. I stopped trying to win competitions that had been decided before I was born. Instead, I built a quiet life. I became a certified public accountant, rented a modest apartment in Boston, and surrounded myself with people who valued honesty more than appearances. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Meanwhile, Vanessa still depended on our parents for almost everything. Whenever she overspent, they paid her credit card bills. Whenever she quit another job, they called it finding herself. Whenever she made another reckless decision, someone else cleaned up the mess. No one ever asked her to face consequences. I often wondered what would happen the day my parents weren't around to rescue her. I had no idea that answer would arrive sooner than anyone expected. Because only a few months later, my grandmother passed away. And with her death came a meeting at a lawyer's office that would change every single one of our lives forever. Grandma Margaret's funeral took place on a cold October morning. The sky was gray, matching the mood of everyone gathered outside the small stone church where she had worshipped for more than 50 years. At least, that was how it looked from the outside. Inside our family, grief wasn't the only emotion in the room. There was tension, expectation, and something else I couldn't quite identify. I stood quietly near the back of the church, listening as friends and neighbors shared stories about the woman who had quietly changed so many lives. To everyone else, she had been generous. To me, she had been the only person who ever made me feel enough. Vanessa sat in the front row between our parents. She cried loudly whenever someone looked in her direction, but the moment they turned away, she was checking her phone beneath the funeral program. I noticed it. No one else seemed to. Mom kept wrapping an arm around Vanessa's shoulders. "My poor baby," she whispered. Dad rubbed her back. "We'll get through this together." No one asked how I was doing. No one ever did. After the service, people gathered outside, offering condolences before leaving. I was about to get into my rental car when our family attorney, Daniel Foster, approached me. He had represented my grandparents for nearly 30 years. His gray suit looked as perfectly pressed as always, but his expression carried an unusual seriousness. "Claire," he said softly, "I'd appreciate it if you joined your parents at my office this afternoon. Your grandmother left specific instructions that the family hear her final wishes together." I nodded. "I'll be there." When I arrived at his office later that day, Vanessa was already making herself comfortable in one of the leather chairs. She looked surprisingly cheerful for someone who had buried her grandmother only a few hours earlier. Mom smiled when I walked in. "There you are." Not because she was happy to see me. She simply wanted everyone present so the meeting could begin. Daniel closed the conference room door. A thick folder rested on the polished oak table. He adjusted his glasses before speaking. "First, let me say that Margaret Bennett was one of the kindest clients I've ever had. She cared deeply about every member of this family." He paused. "I am now going to read the final version of her will." The room became completely silent. Even Vanessa stopped tapping her fingernails against the table. Daniel began with several charitable donations. Local hospitals. Scholarship funds. Veterans organizations. Exactly the sort of generosity Grandma had always believed in. Then he turned the page. The Bennett family residence. He looked toward Vanessa. "Dot is hereby transferred to Vanessa Bennett." Vanessa gasped dramatically before covering her mouth. "Oh my God." Mom reached over and squeezed her hand. "I knew your grandmother adored you." Daniel continued. "The 2024 BMW 7 Series." He barely finished the sentence before Vanessa started smiling. "Dot shall also become the property of Vanessa Bennett." She laughed quietly. "I can't believe this." Dad grinned proudly. "Looks like your grandmother wanted you taken care of." My heart sank. Not because I wanted the house. Not because I wanted the car. But because I could already see exactly where this meeting was going. Daniel cleared his throat again. The 40% ownership interest in Bennett Construction. He looked down at the document. Is transferred entirely to Vanessa Bennett. Silence. Even I wasn't expecting that. That business had been in our family for decades. Grandpa had built it from nothing. I glanced toward Dad. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. Then came the biggest surprise. The Margaret Bennett Family Trust. Daniel spoke slowly. Containing approximately $800,000. Vanessa leaned forward. Shall be transferred in full to Vanessa Bennett. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Vanessa burst into tears. They trusted me. Mom stood and hugged her. I always knew they would. Dad smiled at both of them. You've earned this. I simply sat there. Listening. Watching. Waiting. Surely there was something else. Some small letter. Some keepsake. Some acknowledgement that I had existed. Daniel turned one final page. He looked at me before speaking. To my granddaughter, Claire. The room suddenly felt much quieter. I leave my collection of journals, family photographs, and the hope that she continues living with honesty and compassion. That was it. No money. No property. No investments. Only a few boxes filled with handwritten journals and old family photographs. Before I had time to process it, Mom broke the silence. Claire. Her voice carried the same familiar mixture of pity and disappointment I had heard my entire life. I know this isn't what you hoped for. Dad folded his hands on the table. You've always been difficult. The word landed exactly the way it always had. Not loud. Not angry. Just certain. As though it explained everything. As though 33 years of being overlooked could be summarized in a single sentence. Vanessa looked at me awkwardly. I'm sure Grandma had her reasons. I looked around the room. 3 people who believed they had just witnessed justice. 1 lawyer who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. And me. For the first time in my life. I felt strangely calm. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Not because I accepted their reasoning. But because something inside me finally stopped fighting for people who had already decided who I was. I stood up. Straightened my coat. And picked up the small cardboard box containing Grandma's journals. Congratulations, Vanessa, I said quietly. I hope it brings you everything you're looking for. No one tried to stop me. No one apologized. No one even thanked me for taking the news so well. As I reached the door, Daniel called after me. Claire. I turned. There was one final instruction from your grandmother. The room froze. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. She asked me to tell you only this. Daniel looked directly into my eyes. The truth always arrives. It simply takes the longer road. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. But 6 months later. Those words would become the only thing I could think about. People often imagine that losing your family happens in one dramatic moment. A screaming match. A slammed door. Someone saying, "You're no longer welcome here." But that's not how it happened to me. My family had been losing me for years. The meeting at Daniel Foster's office wasn't the moment they pushed me away. It was simply the day I stopped trying to hold on. After leaving the office, I drove straight back to my apartment in Boston with Grandma's journals sitting on the passenger seat. The house. The BMW. The business shares. The $800,000 trust fund. None of it belonged to me. For the first hour of the drive, I kept asking myself the same question. Was I really worth so little? Then I remembered Grandma's final message. The truth always arrives. It simply takes the longer road. I repeated those words to myself until they became louder than the voices I'd grown up hearing. You're difficult. You're too sensitive. Why can't you be more like Vanessa? For the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to spend another minute trying to prove my worth to people who had already made up their minds. That evening, I unpacked Grandma's journals onto my kitchen table. There were dozens of them. Brown leather covers. Faded pages. Handwritten notes spanning nearly 40 years. I didn't open them. Not yet. Something told me their time would come later. Instead, I focused on the only thing I could control. My future. Monday morning, I walked into my accounting firm as if nothing had happened. Numbers had always made more sense to me than people. Balance sheets didn't play favorites. Tax laws didn't care who was the golden child. Financial statements didn't lie. If something didn't add up, there was always a reason. I buried myself in work. Early mornings. Late nights. Weekend projects. Some people called it obsession. For me, it was peace. My manager noticed the effort almost immediately. 3 months later, I was promoted to senior financial analyst. 6 months after that, I was leading one of our largest corporate audit teams. It wasn't glamorous. There were no champagne parties. No luxury vacations. No expensive handbags. Just quiet mornings, honest work, and the satisfaction of building something no one could take away from me. For the first time in years, I slept well. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed to be living the dream everyone believed she deserved. Almost every morning, another photo appeared on Instagram. A selfie in front of the lake house. Designer shopping bags covering the back seat of her new BMW. Weekend trips to Aspen. Private wine tastings in Napa Valley. Luxury spa weekends in Arizona. She smiled in every picture. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. Perfect life. Thousands of people followed her online. The comments were always the same. You're living the dream. Your grandmother would be so proud. You deserve every bit of this. Sometimes mutual friends would send me screenshots. Have you seen your sister's latest post? I'd smile politely. No. After a while, they stopped asking. The truth was, I had muted Vanessa's account weeks earlier. Not because I hated her. Because I no longer wanted my peace interrupted by someone else's performance. One Saturday afternoon, I received a call from Mom. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. We're having dinner tomorrow. I waited. She continued. Vanessa wants to celebrate the renovations at the lake house. I almost laughed. The renovations had cost more than my annual salary. I won't be able to make it. There was a long silence. Then came the familiar disappointment. You know, Claire. You always separate yourself from this family. I closed my eyes. No, Mom. I finally accepted where I stand in it. She didn't know how to respond. The conversation ended less than a minute later. As I set my phone down, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel rejected. I felt free. Weeks turned into months. My savings account grew. My career continued to improve. I made new friends who had never met my parents. People who judged me by my character instead of old family labels. For the first time since childhood, I wasn't trying to become enough. I already was. Then one rainy Sunday afternoon, while organizing Grandma's journals, a folded envelope slipped from between 2 pages. My name was written across the front in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a single note. Claire. If you're reading this, it means the family has already shown you exactly who they are. Don't waste your life trying to change them. Watch carefully instead. People who build their happiness on money almost always forget one thing. Money leaves clues. I frowned. Money leaves clues. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. At the time, I had no idea what Grandma meant. But somewhere, behind the luxury vacations, the expensive gifts, the smiling photographs, and the picture-perfect life Vanessa showed the world, tiny cracks had already begun to appear. I just couldn't see them yet. There's an old saying in the accounting world. Numbers don't lie. People do. At the time, I didn't realize how true those words would become. My life had settled into a routine I genuinely loved. Monday through Friday, I worked with clients who trusted me to protect their businesses. Evenings were spent reading Grandma Margaret's journals or enjoying quiet dinners with a few close friends. Weekends meant hiking, coffee shops, and catching up on the books I had been meaning to read for years. Life wasn't exciting. It was peaceful. And after 33 years of living in the shadow of my family's expectations, peace felt like a luxury. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed determined to prove to the world that she had inherited the perfect life. Every week brought another extravagant purchase. A custom-designed kitchen for the lake house. A luxury SUV to go alongside the BMW Grandma had left her. A private yacht membership she proudly showed off online. Designer handbags that cost more than some people earned in a month. European vacations that seemed to happen every few weeks. Her social media followers loved every minute of it. Living your best life. You deserve every blessing. Your grandmother would be so proud. The comments poured in by the thousands. What nobody knew was that appearances can be bought. Stability cannot. One evening, I received an unexpected phone call from Daniel Foster. "Claire," he said politely. "I know this isn't really my place, but have you spoken to your family recently?" "No." He hesitated. "I was simply curious." His tone suggested there was more he wanted to say. But he didn't. After we hung up, I found myself thinking about the conversation longer than I expected. Daniel wasn't the type of man who called people without a reason. Still, I decided not to get involved. Their lives were no longer my responsibility. About 2 weeks later, I ran into an old family friend at a professional conference in Chicago. Mark Sullivan had been my father's accountant years ago before retiring. After recognizing me, he smiled warmly. "Claire Bennett. It's been a long time." We shared coffee during one of the conference breaks. Eventually, he asked the question I knew was coming. "How's your father's company doing these days?" I shrugged. "I honestly don't know." He looked surprised. "I assumed you'd be involved by now." I smiled. "No. Vanessa inherited everything." For a brief moment, something crossed his face. Not surprise. Concern. "Oh." He quickly changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Looking back now, that single expression told me more than words ever could. The following month, Bennett Construction announced a major expansion project. Vanessa proudly posted photographs wearing expensive business suits, standing beside my father as if she had built the company herself. The caption read, "Building the future. Proud to continue Grandpa's legacy." Thousands of people congratulated her. I quietly scrolled past. What no one could see in those photographs were the growing cracks beneath the surface. Vendors were waiting longer to be paid. Suppliers quietly complained about delayed invoices. Several experienced employees resigned within the same month. Small warning signs. Easy to ignore. Unless you understood how businesses actually worked. One afternoon, while reviewing financial statements for one of my own clients, I found myself thinking about Bennett construction. Not because I missed it. Because something about the timing bothered me. Luxury renovations. New vehicles. Expensive vacations. Business expansion. If all of those expenses were legitimate, cash flow had to be exceptionally strong. But construction companies rarely operate with unlimited cash. Especially during expansion. I caught myself. Stop. I pushed the thought away. It wasn't my company anymore. Not my problem. Not my responsibility. For the first time in my life, I chose not to rescue people who had never tried to rescue me. Weeks passed. Then another strange thing happened. Mom called. Not to ask how I was doing. Not to apologize. She wanted something. Claire, she began carefully. You still know a lot about accounting, don't you? I almost laughed. I'd hope so. She hesitated. Hypothetically. Whenever someone starts a sentence with hypothetically, it almost never is. If a business accidentally moved money between accounts, that's not necessarily illegal. Right? Every instinct I had as an accountant came alive. What kind of transfer? Oh. Nothing serious. Just curious. I answered carefully. It depends on why the money was moved and whether it was properly documented. Another long silence. Then she quickly changed the subject. We're fine. I was just wondering. The call ended. I stared at my phone for several minutes. That conversation didn't feel normal. But I refused to chase answers. If my parents wanted my professional advice, they could ask honestly. Instead, they wanted free reassurance without revealing the truth. That wasn't happening. A few days later, another surprise arrived. A package from Grandma's attorney. Inside was another journal. Unlike the others, this one had a small handwritten note attached. Read this only when you begin wondering where the money went. I frowned. Where the money went? What money? I opened the journal. The first page contained only one sentence. The easiest way to hide greed is to call it success. I closed the book. Goosebumps spread across my arms. For reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly remembered Mom's strange phone call. The delayed payments. The expensive vacations. Daniel's unexpected concern. Mark Sullivan's uncomfortable silence. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they felt like pieces of a puzzle that hadn't been completed yet. I still didn't know what was happening inside my family's business. But for the first time, I was absolutely certain something was wrong. And somewhere behind Vanessa's perfect photographs, money was disappearing. The only question was, who was taking it? And how long before someone else noticed? Looking back now, I realized the warning signs were everywhere. The problem was that the people closest to the truth were the ones most determined to ignore it. When you've spent your entire life believing you're untouchable, you stop noticing the cracks beneath your feet. Vanessa certainly didn't. Her social media continued to paint the picture of a woman who had inherited not only wealth, but success. Every week brought another glamorous update. A charity gala in New York. A weekend at a luxury ski resort in Colorado. A designer watch worth more than most people spent on a car. Her followers admired her confidence. Her friends admired her lifestyle. Even my parents admired her. She's doing exactly what your grandmother wanted, Mom proudly told relatives during Thanksgiving. Dad would smile and add, Vanessa has real business instincts. I almost laughed the first time I heard that. Vanessa had never balanced a budget in her life. Growing up, she couldn't even remember to pay her own credit card bill. Now everyone believed she was some brilliant businesswoman. But businesses don't run on confidence. They run on numbers. And somewhere behind those numbers, something had started to go terribly wrong. I didn't know it at the time, but one of Bennett Construction's banks had begun asking questions. Nothing dramatic. At least, not yet. It started with a routine compliance review. Large transfers between company accounts. Unusual withdrawals. Payments sent to newly created companies that had almost no business history. By themselves, none of those transactions automatically meant fraud. Construction companies often move large amounts of money. But patterns matter. And this pattern didn't make sense. A compliance officer flagged several transactions for additional review. More documents were requested. More explanations were needed. Inside the Bennett family, no one seemed worried. Dad insisted everything was under control. "It's just paperwork," he told Mom over dinner. "These banks ask questions about everything nowadays." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "They're making a big deal out of nothing." That confidence would later become one of their biggest mistakes. Because while they were dismissing routine questions, the questions were becoming investigations. One afternoon, I received an email from a former colleague who had recently joined a financial consulting firm. He wasn't asking about my family directly. Instead, he wanted my opinion on something hypothetical. If you discovered a company making repeated payments to several LLCs that appeared to have no real operations, what would be your first concern? I stared at the message. There are dozens of legitimate reasons for businesses to pay outside companies. But shell companies, fake vendors, or businesses created only to move money, those are different. I replied carefully. I'd want to verify that the companies actually exist, that services were provided, and that every payment is supported by proper documentation. He thanked me. Nothing more. Still, the question stayed in my mind. A week later, another strange event occurred. Daniel Foster called again. This time, he sounded more serious. "Claire, I can't discuss confidential matters. I understand. But if someone you cared about made poor financial decisions..." He paused. "Would you encourage them to correct those mistakes sooner rather than later?" I answered honestly. "Absolutely." Another silence. "Thank you." He hung up. I had no idea who he was really talking about. But deep down, I already knew. Then came the first rumor. An old employee from Bennett Construction reached out through LinkedIn. His message was short. "I don't know if you remember me, but I worked for your grandfather for nearly 20 years. Things have changed since your sister took over. People are scared to ask questions. Invoices disappear. Payments don't match the contracts anymore. Please tell me your grandfather isn't seeing this from heaven." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I read the message 3 more times. My grandfather had built that company with honesty. Employees stayed for decades because they trusted him. Now, that trust was disappearing. I wanted to call my father. I wanted to ask what was happening. I wanted to demand answers. But then I remembered the lawyer's office. "You've always been difficult." That sentence echoed in my mind. They had made their choice. I wasn't part of their business. So I stayed out of it. December arrived. Christmas decorations covered every shopping center. Vanessa posted photos of enormous gifts stacked beneath the tree in the lake house. Luxury jewelry. Designer furniture. A brand new speedboat wrapped in a giant red bow. Thousands of people admired the photographs. No one asked how she could suddenly afford all of it. What no one outside the family knew was that behind the scenes, the pressure was growing. The bank had requested additional financial records. Another institution questioned several unusually large wire transfers. An investment firm froze part of a transaction until ownership documents could be verified. Then something even more alarming surfaced. According to records later uncovered by investigators, several documents appeared to contain signatures that didn't match earlier legal filings. At first, no one knew whether the signatures were simply inconsistent, or whether someone had signed documents they weren't authorized to sign. That single discovery changed everything. Because once questions about signatures begin, every document connected to them comes under scrutiny. Loans, property transfers, trust distributions, business agreements, everything. Yet inside the Bennett family home, life continued as if nothing had changed. Dad still believed the banks were overreacting. Mom insisted people were simply jealous of Vanessa's success. Vanessa herself laughed whenever someone mentioned audits or paperwork. "It's just rich people problems," she joked during one of her videos. She had no idea that somewhere inside a federal office, someone had already started connecting the dots. Every transfer, every signature, every hidden account, every unexplained investment. Piece by piece, a picture was beginning to emerge. And while my family celebrated another expensive holiday, they failed to notice that the walls around them were slowly closing in. The greatest danger isn't always the one you can see. Sometimes, it's the one quietly collecting evidence while you believe you've already won. 6 months. That was exactly how long it had been since I walked out of Daniel Foster's office carrying nothing but Grandma Margaret's journals. 6 months since my parents gave Vanessa everything. 6 months since Dad looked me in the eye and said, "You've always been difficult." In those 6 months, I had rebuilt my life one quiet day at a time. My career was thriving. I had earned another promotion. My savings account was growing. Most importantly, I had finally found something I had spent my entire childhood searching for: peace. I no longer checked Vanessa's social media. I no longer waited for my parents to call. I no longer wondered what I could have done differently. Some questions stop hurting once you accept that they were never yours to answer. It was a Tuesday morning in early April. Rain tapped softly against my apartment windows as I made coffee before work. My phone sat charging on the kitchen counter. I hadn't looked at it since the night before. As I reached for it, the screen lit up. My heart skipped. 47 missed calls. 23 text messages. 11 voicemails. Every single one was from my mother. For a second, I honestly thought someone had died. My hands froze around the coffee mug. Mom had never called me that many times in my life. Not on birthdays. Not on holidays. Not even after Grandma's funeral. I opened the messages. "Claire, please answer. It's an emergency. Please call me back. I need you. Please, sweetheart." The last message had been sent only 3 minutes earlier. Without thinking, I pressed the call button. She answered before the first ring finished. "Claire." Her voice was almost unrecognizable. She was crying so hard that she could barely breathe. "Mom?" "Claire." "Thank God." "What happened?" For several seconds, all I could hear were sobs. Then she managed to speak. "They're here." "Who's here?" "The FBI." My stomach tightened. "What?" "The FBI is at Vanessa's house." Her voice broke completely. "They showed up this morning with search warrants. They're everywhere. They're taking computers. They're carrying boxes out of the house." "Oh, Claire. What is happening to us?" For a moment, the entire apartment became silent. The only sound was the rain outside my window. I closed my eyes. Grandma's words echoed through my mind. The truth always arrives. It simply takes the longer road. It had arrived. Finally. I spoke as calmly as I could. Mom. Take a deep breath. I can't. She cried. They're asking questions about the trust fund. They're asking about the business accounts. They're talking to Vanessa separately. They won't tell us anything. Her panic filled every pause. I could picture the scene without even being there. Luxury cars lining the driveway. Neighbors watching from behind their curtains. Federal agents moving through the house with quiet professionalism. The same house my parents had proudly handed to Vanessa. The same house they believed represented success. Now it had become the center of something far darker. Claire, Mom whispered desperately. You understand finances. You have to help us. I looked out the window. 6 months earlier. She hadn't asked how I felt. She hadn't cared that I had left the lawyer's office with nothing. Now. Suddenly. She needed me. I don't even know what's happening, I said honestly. They think Vanessa did something with Grandma's money. Mom cried. They keep asking about transfers. Investments. Accounts. I don't understand any of it. I remained silent. Not because I didn't care. Because I knew that panic never reveals the whole story. Professional investigators don't arrive at someone's home because of one mistake. Cases like this are built over time. Weeks. Months. Sometimes years. Every document. Every bank record. Every financial transaction. Every signature. Collected carefully before anyone ever knocked on the door. That thought chilled me. If investigators were standing inside Vanessa's house. This had been unfolding for much longer than any of us realized. Claire. Mom's voice became small. What do we do? I took a slow breath. For now. You tell the truth. She didn't answer. Instead. She cried harder. And for the first time in my life. I realized something heartbreaking. My mother wasn't crying because she'd finally understood how unfairly she'd treated me. She was crying because, for the first time, the consequences had reached her own front door. As I ended the call, I looked toward the bookshelf where Grandma's journals rested. One sentence from her final note came back to me. Money leaves clues. She had been right. Every dollar leaves a trail. Sooner or later. Someone follows it. I didn't go to Vanessa's house that morning. There was nothing I could do there. And after everything that had happened over the years, I wasn't about to rush in pretending we were suddenly a happy family. Instead, I drove to work. Or at least, I tried to. I made it halfway to the office before my phone rang again. This time, it was Daniel Foster. Claire, he said, his voice unusually tense. Where are you? In my car. Good. I need you to stay calm. I almost smiled. I've been staying calm for 6 months. He let out a quiet sigh. I suppose you have. There was a brief silence before he continued. I can't discuss an active investigation, but I think you're going to start hearing a lot of rumors today. I already have. Then don't believe everything you hear. I won't. After we hung up, I pulled into a nearby parking lot. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to go into the office. Instead, I sat there watching the rain slide down my windshield. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message from an old neighbor. Claire. Turn on the local news. I opened the live stream. The reporter stood outside the entrance to Vanessa's gated neighborhood. Police vehicles blocked part of the street while federal agents moved in and out of the property behind them. The camera stayed on the public road. The reporter spoke carefully. Federal authorities executed a search warrant this morning at the home of a local business executive. Officials have not released details about the investigation and no criminal charges have been announced. My stomach tightened. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was real. The live footage showed agents carrying sealed evidence boxes toward government vehicles. A desktop computer. Several laptops. Stacks of binders. Storage drives. Boxes filled with financial records. Everything was carefully labeled before being loaded into unmarked SUVs. Nothing about it looked rushed. Nothing about it looked random. Whoever had organized this operation had planned it for a long time. I remembered what I'd told Mom. Investigations like this don't begin overnight. They are built piece by piece. Transaction by transaction. Document by document. My phone rang again. Mom. I answered. They're taking everything. She cried. Every computer. Every file cabinet. They even asked for old bank statements. I listened quietly. They've gone through Vanessa's office. Your father's office. Even the safe. Her breathing was uneven. They have boxes. So many boxes. I closed my eyes. They're following the records, I said softly. What records? I don't know. And they won't tell us anything. For the first time in years. I genuinely felt sorry for her. Not because she had lost money. Because certainty had vanished. For decades, my parents believed their family name protected them from consequences. Now strangers were walking through their home with legal authority. The Bennett name suddenly meant nothing. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. News vans lined the street outside. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, pretending to walk their dogs while watching every vehicle that entered or left. People whispered behind half-closed curtains. The same neighbors who had once admired my parents now stared at the house with curiosity instead of respect. Reputation takes decades to build. Sometimes it disappears before lunchtime. Later that afternoon, another call came. This time, it was Mark Sullivan. I figured you deserved to know something. What is it? I don't know the details. But I do know investigators don't seize this much evidence unless they've already reviewed a significant amount of financial information. So this didn't start today. No. It probably started months ago. That confirmed what I'd suspected all along. The strange bank questions. The compliance reviews. The delayed payments. The unusual transfers. The mysterious phone calls. Every piece had been leading here. I thanked Mark and ended the call. That evening, I finally returned home. Grandma's journals were still sitting on my bookshelf. Almost without thinking, I picked up the newest one and opened it. A folded piece of paper slipped onto my lap. It wasn't a letter. It was a copy of one page from Grandpa's old business notebook. At the bottom, he had written a sentence in blue ink. A business never collapses because people ask questions. It collapses because the wrong people refuse to answer them. I stared at those words for a long time. For years, I'd believed this story was about favoritism. About being the forgotten daughter. About watching my sister inherit everything while I walked away with nothing. Now I realized. That had only been the beginning. Something much bigger had been unfolding behind the scenes. The missing money wasn't an accident. The strange transactions weren't misunderstandings. Someone had been making decisions they never expected anyone to examine. And now, someone finally had. For the first time since Grandma's funeral, I wasn't wondering whether my family had made a mistake. I was wondering something far more frightening. How much of this had they known? And if the evidence inside those sealed boxes was as serious as it appeared? What other secrets were about to come to light? For the next several weeks, the Bennett family disappeared from public view. Vanessa stopped posting on social media. The photos of luxury vacations were replaced by silence. The expensive dinners. The smiling selfies. The inspirational captions about success. Gone. It was as if someone had erased the version of her life she had worked so hard to create. Meanwhile, speculation spread everywhere. Former employees talked. Neighbors whispered. Local business owners shared rumors over coffee. Some stories were completely false. Others were much closer to the truth. I stayed away from all of it. Every morning, I went to work. Every evening, I came home to my quiet apartment. For the first time in my life, my family's chaos no longer controlled my emotions. Then, one Friday afternoon, Daniel Foster called. "Claire," he said. "I think it's time we talked." We met the following morning at a small cafe a few blocks from his office. He looked older than I remembered. The last few weeks had clearly taken a toll on him. After ordering coffee, he looked at me for several seconds before speaking. "I've represented your family for nearly 30 years. I know. I also represented your grandparents." I nodded. "They were good people." "They were," he replied. "And they spent their entire lives trying to build something that would outlive them." He paused. Unfortunately, wealth can become dangerous when people begin believing they deserve it instead of earning it. I didn't interrupt. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who wasted words. "There are limits to what I can discuss," he continued, "but enough information has become public that I can tell you this." He folded his hands together. "The problems didn't begin after your grandmother died. They started much earlier." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "What do you mean?" "For years, your father allowed Vanessa to make financial decisions she wasn't qualified to make." I frowned. "But she wasn't running the company. Officially." He emphasized the word. "No. But in practice, she had access to accounts, investment decisions, and company resources that should have required much stronger oversight." I sat back in my chair. "So this wasn't one person's mistake?" Daniel slowly shook his head. "No. It became a pattern." That single sentence explained everything. This wasn't a story about one reckless daughter. It was about years of bad decisions that no one was willing to challenge. Because every time Vanessa made a mistake, someone else fixed it. Every time she overspent, my parents covered the bill. Every time she ignored responsibility, they called it confidence. They didn't raise her to face consequences. They raised her to believe consequences were for other people. Eventually, reality disagreed. Over the following days, more information became public through court filings and financial disclosures. Investigators believed company money had been moved through several accounts without proper documentation. Some investments had been approved without adequate records. Questions were raised about authorization for certain financial transactions. Every new document painted the same picture. Weak oversight. Poor controls. Blind trust. And a family that believed no one would ever question them. One evening, I received an unexpected visitor. It was my father. When I opened the apartment door, I barely recognized him. The confident businessman who had always seemed larger than life now looked exhausted. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red. His expensive suit hung loosely, as though he hadn't slept in days. "May I come in?" For a moment, I considered saying no. Instead, I stepped aside. He sat quietly on my couch, staring at the floor. I owe you an apology. Those were words I had never expected to hear. I should have listened to you years ago. I looked at him carefully. I never had the chance to say anything. He closed his eyes. That's exactly the problem. The room fell silent. Finally, he spoke again. We spent so much time protecting Vanessa that we stopped preparing her for real life. His voice cracked. Every time she failed, we blamed someone else. Every time she wanted more, we gave her more. We convinced ourselves we were helping. He shook his head slowly. We weren't helping. We were teaching her that rules didn't apply to her. I listened without speaking. He continued. And while we were making excuses for her, he looked directly at me. That we kept expecting you to carry yourself. You solved your own problems. You paid your own bills. You built your own career. So we assumed. He stopped. What? That you'd always be fine. Those words hurt more than anything he had ever said before. Not because they were cruel. Because they were honest. I wasn't ignored because I had failed. I was ignored because I had succeeded without asking for anything. The more responsible I became, the less attention I received. My father wiped his eyes. I thought giving Vanessa everything was protecting our family. Instead, I may have destroyed it. I thought back to the lawyer's office. You've always been difficult. For years, I believed those words defined me. Now I finally understood the truth. I had never been the difficult daughter. I had simply been the only one who wasn't allowed to make excuses. Grandma had seen it long before anyone else. She hadn't left me the largest inheritance. She had left me something far more valuable. Perspective. She knew that money without character becomes a burden. She knew that unconditional favoritism eventually creates unconditional irresponsibility. Most importantly, she knew the truth would eventually reveal itself. Not through revenge. Not through anger. But through the consequences people create for themselves. As my father quietly left my apartment that evening, I realized something. The investigation wasn't what destroyed my family. It merely exposed damage that had been growing for decades. The fortune had never been the real inheritance. The real inheritance was a lifetime of choices. And now, every one of those choices had finally come due. I hadn't heard from my parents in almost 3 weeks. Not after my father's visit. Not after the search at Vanessa's house. Not after the endless news stories that slowly disappeared from the headlines but continued to dominate our family's lives. Life, strangely enough, had become quiet again. I went to work. I met friends for dinner. I read Grandma's journals before bed. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. Then, on a chilly Saturday afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. My parents. Both of them. They looked nothing like the confident couple I had grown up with. Dad's hair seemed grayer. Mom's eyes were swollen, as if she hadn't slept in days. When I opened the door, neither of them spoke immediately. "May we come in?" Dad asked softly. I stepped aside. We sat around my small dining table. No one touched the coffee I offered. The silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Finally, Mom began to cry. "I'm so sorry, Claire." I had imagined hearing those words for years. I thought they would make everything better. Instead, they simply sounded late. Very late. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "We should have listened to you." I looked at her calmly. "I never remember you asking what I thought." She lowered her head. "You're right." Dad folded his hands together. We spent years believing we were protecting our family. But all we really did was protect our own mistakes. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Mom whispered something I never expected to hear. "We failed you." Those 3 words hung in the room. Simple. Honest. Painful. I didn't rush to forgive them. Some wounds don't heal because someone finally admits they exist. Dad reached into his briefcase and placed a folder on the table. "We need your help." There it was. The sentence I had expected from the moment they walked through the door. I looked at the folder but didn't open it. "What kind of help?" He took a deep breath. "There are accountants. Attorneys. Financial records. We don't understand everything. You do." Mom reached across the table. "We're not asking you to fix everything. We're asking you to help us understand what's happening." For a moment, I stared at my hands. A dozen memories flooded back. I remembered being 10 years old and watching Vanessa receive a brand new bicycle while I was told to be grateful for her old one. I remembered graduating first in my class while my parents skipped the ceremony because Vanessa had a dance recital. I remembered every birthday they forgot. Every family dinner where my opinion didn't matter. Every holiday where I quietly cleaned the kitchen while everyone celebrated around Vanessa. Then I remembered the lawyer's office. "You've always been difficult." Those words had followed me for most of my life. Now the same people who had dismissed me because I was difficult were asking for the very knowledge and judgment they had spent years ignoring. Life has a remarkable sense of irony. Dad broke the silence. "I know we don't deserve your help." "No," I answered quietly. "You don't." Neither of them argued. For the first time, they accepted my answer without trying to defend themselves. Mom's tears returned. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just..." She struggled to finish the sentence. "I don't want to lose my daughter." I looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't lose me today. You lost me a little at a time. Every time you chose Vanessa instead of fairness. Every time you called me difficult instead of listening. Every time I had to earn the love that she received automatically." The room became completely silent. Neither of them denied it. Because they couldn't. Dad slowly nodded. "You're right. I've replayed those moments every night. I wish I could change them." "You can't," I replied. "The past doesn't offer refunds." Another long silence followed. Finally, I opened the folder. Inside were financial summaries, letters from attorneys, and requests for additional records from various institutions. I read through several pages. When I finished, I closed the folder again. "I'll explain the documents. I'll help you understand the financial process." Mom looked up hopefully. "But," I continued, "I won't manipulate records. I won't contact anyone on your behalf. And I won't say something I don't believe just because we're family." Dad nodded immediately. "I wouldn't ask you to." "I hope not." I stood and walked to the bookshelf where Grandma's journals rested. Picking up one of them, I smiled faintly. "Grandma used to tell me something." Both of them looked at me. She said that character isn't measured by how people treat you when they need nothing. It's measured by how you treat people when they suddenly need everything. I placed the journal back on the shelf. "I'm willing to be kind. But kindness doesn't mean pretending the past never happened." Mom quietly wiped another tear from her face. For the first time in decades, she wasn't trying to explain away her choices. She was simply listening. As they prepared to leave, Dad stopped at the door. "Claire." I looked at him. "I'm proud of the woman you've become." A year earlier, those words would have meant everything to me. Now, they were simply true. They no longer defined my worth. After they left, I stood by the window watching their car disappear down the street. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I felt something far more valuable. Free. Because I had finally learned the lesson Grandma had tried to teach me all those years ago. Real peace doesn't come from watching people suffer. It comes from refusing to let their choices define the rest of your life. And for the first time since I was a little girl, I knew exactly who I was. People often ask me how the story ended. Did my parents ever rebuild what they lost? Did Vanessa ever return to the life she once showed off online? Did everything somehow go back to normal? The honest answer is no. Some chapters of life don't end with everything being repaired. They end with people finally accepting the consequences of the choices they've made. Over the months that followed, the Bennett family slowly faded from the spotlight. The expensive parties disappeared. The luxury vacations stopped. The lake house was eventually sold. The BMW that had once symbolized victory was gone. The business Grandpa had spent 40 years building was no longer in our family's hands. Watching all of that happen should have made me feel satisfied. It didn't. Because revenge has a strange way of disappointing the people who wait for it. The truth was, I didn't need to see my family lose everything to feel like I had finally won. I had already won the day I stopped measuring my worth by their approval. One Sunday morning, almost a year after Grandma Margaret's funeral, I drove to the small cemetery where she and Grandpa rested. The air was cool. A gentle breeze moved through the old oak trees. I carried a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite flowers. Kneeling beside her headstone, I smiled. I finally understand. For years, I believed Grandma had left me with almost nothing. A few journals. Some old family photographs. A handwritten note. At the time, it felt unfair. Now I realized she had given me something that couldn't be spent, stolen, or taken away. She had given me perspective. Every journal contained a lesson. Not about money. About people. One passage caught my attention more than any other. Never envy the person who inherits wealth. Envy the person who inherits wisdom. Money can disappear in a single generation. Character can protect generations yet to come. I closed the journal and smiled through tears. She had known all along. She understood that the greatest danger wasn't losing money. It was raising people who believed money could replace integrity. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of my colleagues. Congratulations. The partnership vote was unanimous. Welcome to the executive team. I laughed quietly. A year earlier, I would have called my parents first. I would have hoped they were proud of me. Now, I simply felt proud of myself. That afternoon, I signed the paperwork for my first home. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't on a lake. It didn't come with luxury cars or family trust funds. Every dollar of it had been earned. Every wall represented years of discipline. Every room reminded me that peace is built, not inherited. A few weeks later, I received one final letter from Daniel Foster. Inside was a single envelope that Grandma had instructed him to deliver exactly 1 year after her funeral. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. My dearest Claire. If you're reading this, then you've already discovered what I hoped you would. Families sometimes confuse love with favoritism. They confuse generosity with enabling. And they confuse wealth with success. Don't make the same mistakes. Choose honesty over comfort. Choose peace over approval. Choose self-respect over inheritance. One day, someone will look to you for guidance. Give them what money never could. With all my love. Grandma. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the first journal where it belonged. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like the fortunate one. Because I hadn't inherited a fortune. I had inherited a compass. Money had changed my sister. Approval had blinded my parents. But hardship had revealed who I really was. Looking back now, I don't hate my family. Hatred would only keep me tied to a past I've already outgrown. I hope they find peace. I hope Vanessa eventually learns that success isn't measured by what you own, but by the life you can honestly live. As for me, I no longer introduce myself as the daughter who was left with nothing. Because that isn't my story anymore. My story is about the woman who discovered that the greatest inheritance isn't a house, or a business, or a trust fund. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your value was never for sale. And if there's one lesson I hope you take from my journey, it's this. The people who overlook your worth today may one day realize what they lost. But don't spend your life waiting for that moment. Build a life so full of purpose, peace, and self-respect that whether they ever understand or not, no longer changes who you are. Sometimes, karma doesn't arrive as revenge. Sometimes, it arrives as freedom. And freedom is the one inheritance no one can ever take away.